Someone posted a comment on one of my videos asking for me to give my perspective on how people could entirely not give a shit about other people. For example, the leaders of countries that we see who allow their people to be exploited, or who don't dispatch emergency services to an area that's currently experiencing some kind of disaster, or who don't warn their citizens of an impending disaster that leads to loss of life that could have been avoided. So a lot of what we're seeing around us in the world is a very obvious reflection of some not so nice qualities that each of us in different degrees possess. It's that particular feeling of, you know what, I just don't give a shit. Do whatever you want, I don't care. I'm just going to do what I want, you do what you want, and you know what, whatever, just whatever. So there's that dimension, as well as where we see that warning, for example, should have been given but wasn't. It's a similar kind of thought pattern, but a little bit different in that you know you should do something, you know that doing it will benefit others, but you just don't. Maybe you just can't work up the will to do it. You'd rather be watching this TV show, playing this game, sleeping in bed, whatever it is. And don't try and say you've never been there, because we've all been there. We all know what that's like. Putting something off, not doing it because we just don't bring ourselves to it for whatever reasons at that time. So these things that our leaders are doing are not some exception to human nature. It's more like extreme examples of what we currently allow to be our nature. So they're not unusual specimens. They're not exhibiting this behavior as being completely out of bounds of the typical human nature. It's just amplified versions of us, amplified versions of the worst parts of ourselves. And how does someone get to that point? Well, obviously every person and every pattern will be a little bit different in the context, but it's, at the end of the day, generally speaking, it's those things that we give attention to. So the more we live a particular pattern, or whether it's a thought pattern or a behavioral pattern, the more it becomes us and we become it. And it can become more difficult to break out of it the more it solidifies within us. Not impossible, just challenging. And especially challenging for people who are very comfortable in whatever position they're in at the moment, which can sometimes simply be an extremely intelligent person because they've been able to rationalize themselves to themselves and justify all of their behaviors very rationally, or it could be someone who's very wealthy or very powerful. So the question is, how do we do these things to each other where we display this absolute disregard for life, essentially? Well, just look in the mirror. I mean, at the end of the day, that's one of the common themes about humanity. Look at how much of our lives displays an absolute disregard for life. Let's look at this plastic issue and how much damage it does to the animals, to the parts of nature that we don't see. Look at most of the products in your home. They probably contain palm oil, which is part of the deforestation and massive extinction level events happening in certain parts of the world. So a good thing to practice for each of us is to stop pointing the finger at what everyone else is doing and start looking very seriously at what we're actually doing within our lives. And first addressing those patterns, first addressing our thought patterns that are not so honorable, and addressing our behavioral patterns that actually do have an impact on others around us that we may not notice because we're so comfortable within them, and addressing the things that we're supporting within our lifestyles. So from there, we, at the very least, are living an example to others around us. And maybe within that, something opens up where we can take it to the next level of being able to live that example to a greater audience. So not everyone is going to be a president or a CEO of a giant company. There's far too many people in the world for everyone to have a very large role, but we can each take a role, and there is no role that is too small, even if it's just being an average person within an average community, being part of making themselves and therefore their community better. So the blame game doesn't help anyone, because it takes all of the focus off of ourselves and puts it on someone else, and then we don't have to look at ourselves. That's why I suggest not to point fingers. Focus on yourself and go from there. Thank you very much for watching. You're going to see me next time.